Hi, hello everyone. Good morning. Thank you so much for tuning in for what is the third episode of 20 episodes series, Misplaced. We're really happy to have you here again. Just a reminder, as the name suggests, Misplaced is a series that talks about misplacements and issues within the food system. And what we're doing here is meeting with experts and entrepreneurs to understand the solutions. So today we have a fellow Hong Konger with us that we are lucky enough to be able to meet in person. This is also a good time to thank our venue. We are at the Hive Hong Kong, and we want to thank them for opening up their doors to us and hosting this episode. For those of you that are in Hong Kong, make sure to fill out our feedback form at the end of this episode to win a free pass to any Hive Hong Kong location. And now on to our guest and friend. I am joined here by Pol Fabrega, who is the co-founder of Rooftop Republic. Hi, Paul.
Hi,
welcome.
Christina. Hi.
Thanks for being here with us. I'll steal the screen just a few seconds more because I'd like to tell our audience a little bit more about you. So as I mentioned, Paul is the co-founder of Rooftop Republic, and his co-founder and Rooftop Republic have been around since the early days of the urban farming movement. So their mission is to help transform the way we grow food, the way we consume it, and the way we think about food. So what is going to be really cool about Paul's talk today is that it kind of brings in nicely together the previous two episodes that we had. For those of you that tuned in, our first episode was with Daisy Tam, and we talked about the challenges to the food system coming from urbanization. And then last week we were joined by Paul Newnham, and we talked about sustainable development goals and how food actually affects pretty much all aspects of our life. And so without further ado, I'm going to pass it on to Paul to talk to you about the intricacies, but also the benefits of urban farming.
Thank you so much.
On to you, Paul.
Thank you so much, Christina. And I guess I just wanted to start by congratulating you and the whole team at Livin Farms for putting together this amazing series and this amazing lineup of speakers. I'm honored and humbled to be part of this series, and I'm happy to make my little contribution today with this episode. So as Christina was saying, I'm the co-founder of Rooftop Republic. I'm an urban farmer, and today I'm going to be talking a little bit about farming in the city. And my talk today will revolve around these four main sort of sections. We'll just introduce very briefly about Rooftop Republic and the type of work that we do, just to give you a sense of the work that we do, and also like a sense of like how our projects and urban farming sort of installations look like. We'll talk a little bit about our food system and some of the problems with our food system, and then we'll talk a little bit about what urban agriculture or urban farming is, what are some of the benefits, what are some of the different types of urban farming, and how urban farming can be a solution to some of these problems that we've identified in our food system. And then we'll end up with some tips and some ideas and things that you can do to get involved and join the urban farming movement. So a little bit about myself. I'm originally from Barcelona, and my background prior to moving to Hong Kong or prior to kind of getting involved with urban farming was mostly related to the nonprofit world. And so I had no idea about food. I had no idea about agriculture. I don't come from a family of farmers. I didn't grow up in a rural environment. I didn't know anything about agriculture before I moved to Hong Kong. And I would have never suspected that I would be, embarking on this journey to become an urban farmer in one of the most densely populated cities in the world. But here we are, talking about urban farming today. I guess the moment I understood the challenges related to our food system and the potential that urban farming brings to our city, I just got really passionate about it, and it became my life mission ever since. Okay, sorry, we had a little problem with our camera. So just a little bit about Rooftop Republic. Our vision is to promote sustainable cities and communities through urban farming, and the way we do that is by designing, building, and managing urban farms for all kinds of different people, all kinds of different clients, and running a whole range of workshops and programs and events related to urban farming and related to food. So far, we've built more than 60 urban farms all across Hong Kong, transforming more than 75 square feet of underused, generally rooftop space into, edible and green spaces, and have, arranged and organized thousands of events and engagements for more than 15,000, people, along the way over the last 6 years. These are just some pictures, just some visuals of how just to show you how some of our rooftop, projects look like. This is a project we have in a shopping mall where we've integrated a large urban farm into the rooftop. Is the largest open to the public rooftop in Hong Kong. This is a similar one we have in another different shopping mall. This is more to attract, visitors and engage the general public, around the concept of food and farming. We have projects with food and beverage. This is in the Hong Kong Jockey Club clubhouse where we're working directly with Philippe here, the chef, and his team to supply high quality vegetables to the kitchen directly. We also work with corporates and companies to engage their employees. This is on top of the Bank of East Asia's offices. Similarly, here we have another project on top of the Bank of America Tower. This is right in the middle of the financial district, in Admiralty, next to all the banks, and we've transformed a former helipad into a rooftop farm, and all of the harvest that we get from here is actually donated to Feeding Hong Kong, which is a local food bank here in Hong Kong. Other projects we have are more on the residential side, where we are integrating camera.
Can we confirm that you can hear us now?
I think I cannot listen.
Thanks for your patience. We're trying to
now.
figure it out. I think now you should be able to hear us. Okay, I see. Yes, thank you, Suji, for letting us know. And Kushbu, fantastic. Paul, we'll give you extra time, of course, so please continue.
No problem. Sorry about that. Sorry for technical issues. Just wanted to start by talking a little bit about our food system and some of the problems associated with the way we're currently growing and consuming and distributing and wasting food. Initially, I had a whole lot of slides here that I wanted to walk you through with a lot of different statistics and all of the different problems. but we only have a limited time for the presentation, and we could go on and on and on and on about all of the problems associated with our food system. And I understand that there are other speakers here that will probably, cover some of those topics. So I'm gonna keep this, at least the presentation, simple. But bottom line is that there is nothing that we do as human beings that has a bigger impact on our environment than food, than agriculture. Just to give you, an idea, agriculture is the largest user of water, for example, our precious and limited fresh water resources. We use 70% of the fresh water that we use for human activity for agriculture. Agriculture is also the largest polluter of water through the use of chemicals of every kind, pesticides, fertilizers, fungicides, also through the raising of animals. All of the waste they generate ends up in our water reservoirs, and all of that ends in our water sources. Agriculture is also the largest user of land by far. Often we think about urbanization as one of the problems in terms of turning land into urban spaces. Just to give you a sense, if we put all of the urban areas together, it only accounts for 2% of the total land on this planet, versus 45%, which is what we allocate to grow our food, essentially. So agriculture is the largest user of land by far, and is also the largest cause of deforestation and of biodiversity loss. We are losing entire ecosystems because we're clearing forests, we're clearing rainforests, we're clearing all kinds of spaces to devote them to grow food. Agriculture is also the largest emitter of greenhouse gas emissions. Estimates say that agriculture accounts for up to a third of all of the greenhouses that we emit to the atmosphere. So the footprint of our food is just monumental. There's also other problems related to our food system, food waste, as I'm sure Daisy covered very well in the first episode. There's also issues about the way we're raising animals and the way we're consuming so much meat and all of the impact that's having on our health, but also on our environment. So the problems go on and on and on and on. And I had this picture of a fridge because every time we're opening our fridge, we are entering and we are participating in that food system. So that's not something that happens aside from us, somewhere else. We are an active part of that food system. Every time we eat, every time we consume, we are at the end, receiving end of that food supply chain. As I said, we could go on and on and on here, but I want to move on to urban farming and what's the promise of urban farming and how can urban farming address some of the challenges that we're seeing in the food system. So very briefly, what is urban farming? Urban farming is generally simply put, the practice of cultivating, processing, distributing foods in and around urban areas. And I guess the particularity about urban farming is that although it's kind of the same thing everywhere you do it in any city, it also is very much embedded with the particular conditions that you have in a particular city, whether it's from a geographic perspective or an economic perspective or cultural, political, economic perspective. All of it integrates differently depending, or it takes different shapes and different forms depending on which city we're talking about. And I'll share a few examples, a few case studies from different cities, just to give you a sense of how this can develop differently in different cities. The benefits of urban farming are just long and incredible. From an environmental perspective, the fact that we are growing food right where we consume it in the middle of the city, it means that we're cutting back on all of the food miles. We can also promote biodiversity in the city. We are turning empty, unused rooftop spaces, for example, into green spaces where we can attract biodiversity. We can tackle, air pollution or island heat effect that happens in the city. We can improve the sustainability sort of performance of the building. It also creates opportunities for us to recycle, food waste in the city and turn it into compost and put it in our rooftops straight away. At an economic level, it also promotes, and that's what we're also trying to do, promote a local economy around food, right? Getting farmers, getting all kinds of people around the local food system to generate revenue, to generate jobs and different opportunities at a local level. From a health perspective, the fact that we're providing access to fresh food, right? It's food that doesn't have to travel thousands of miles to get to us. We pick it the day it's ripe and the day it's ready, and we can consume it straight away. And we can retain all of those good nutrients in our foods. We're also using urban farming as a platform to educate the public about healthy living and healthy eating. And then from a more social perspective, we are using also urban farming to engage the community, to bring all kinds of different people together, to educate our young people, our children, and to tackle a whole range of different social issues through this platform of urban farming. And for those concerned, I know that the previous session was on SDGs. Food and urban farming can touch and can be aligned with so many of the different sort of SDGs. In particular, these four we've identified. I think it's important to understand that there's a whole range of types of urban farms. And I know that people associate urban farming with production, like having an urban farm that's focused on producing vegetables and selling those vegetables to the market. But there are a whole range of other types of urban farms. So, there are residential urban farms, urban farms that are incorporated into a residential property or complex, like the one I've shown before, or home growers, people who like maybe like yourselves, individuals who have their own space and are growing their own food at home, or community-based sort of urban farms, community farms, or community-supported agriculture, which is very popular in the US. Basically, spaces where people rent a small plot, perhaps, and they can grow their own food in a communal space. There are also more like institution-based types of farms that are set up in a school, in a hospital, in a church, in a community center, and that aim to engage those stakeholders in the activities related to the farming. There are also, as I mentioned before, urban farms that are incorporated or integrated with a restaurant operation or with a hotel operation, so serving the kitchen directly and being a source of their own fresh and organic produce. There's also retail, incorporating farms in shopping malls. Why not? And using that as part of the image and as part of the concept of that shopping mall. And then, as I said, there's production-focused farms. This is, for example, a very famous one in Canada, which uses a greenhouse kind of method, high yields, hydroponics, quite tech, with large amounts of production that they can get, and they can serve the local market there. So the range is incredible, and this is just some like generic categories. I also wanted to share some different examples of how different cities are taking on this urban farming, movement, and how it's taking, different shapes and different forms. This image here is of a very recent rooftop farm. They say it's the largest rooftop farm in the world. It's monumental. It's on top of a convention center in Versailles, and outside of Paris. And this is just a representation, an illustration, to talk about Paris, which is a really interesting case because they have a very progressive mayor and government, and they have a policy where they're going to turn 100 hectares within the city of rooftop space, of wall space, any kind of empty space. They're going to turn that into green spaces, and then 1/3 of that will be devoted to urban agriculture. So that's just one example of how governments and how cities can fully integrate urban farming into their policy and into their cities. Similarly, Singapore is also a fantastic example that I always like to reference. I know that Hong Kong as Hong Kong, we hate to be compared to Singapore, but in this case, they are way ahead. They are way ahead. And I wish, I wish we would go in that direction a bit more. So Singapore, very similar to Hong Kong, very densely populated city, not a lot of space, very developed city, very modern, service-oriented kind of markets. They have established that by 2030, they want to supply 30% of their own food. And to achieve that, they're promoting the local urban agriculture big time. They're giving subsidies, training space. They're giving all kinds of support to the local entrepreneurs and farmers in Singapore to really beef up their production and be able to have a much more secure food system for Singapore, which is dependent on imports the same way that Hong Kong is. I'm going to skip through this to go into Hong Kong. So Hong Kong, we've gone from producing 50 to 60% of our food back in the 60s and 70s to 2%, or even less than 2%. And so this is kind of a graph that illustrates that production. This is just vegetables. It doesn't count like fisheries and other food that we also produce in Hong Kong. But in terms of vegetables, we've gone from 50% to close to absolutely zero. And there are many reasons behind this decline in the recent decades. But contrary to popular belief, it's not because of the lack of space, which I know it's something that it's a question that comes up always, right? We don't have space in Hong Kong to grow food. Well, it's not true. We actually have a lot of agricultural farmland compared to Singapore. We have way more farmland that's available, but 84% of our farmland is not currently being used for farming. It's fallow. Oftentimes, owners of that land find it more profitable to put a shipping container, and use it for storage than use it for farming and sort of working the land for producing food. And there's a whole range of reasons behind. Maybe we can go into that later in the Q&A section. Moving forward, I think that despite Hong Kong has, the agriculture and local food scene here has gone in decline, we have a huge opportunity in front of us. We have the farmland that's totally available. We have, in addition to that, we have 6 million square meters of rooftop space that could be suitable for rooftop farming. And this comes from a study from HKU. We also have an incredible increase in demand for healthy and local and sustainable food. We get inquiries from chefs, from all kinds of people every day of like, where can we get local foods? Where can we get organic food that's from Hong Kong? There's also a new generation of urban farmers that's emerging. We are part of that movement, but there's other companies, there's other kinds of organizations and people involved in like sort of revamping this whole system and transforming our food system at the local level. And I always like to say that if we can crack this in Hong Kong, if we can make this work in Hong Kong, we can be an example for the world. We already live in the future. Hong Kong is like the future city, right? We live in this incredibly dense urban space, and more people are going to be living in cities in the world, as we know, and more cities are going to be looking like Hong Kong. So if we can crack this and make it work in Hong Kong, I believe it can work absolutely anywhere. So what can you do to join the movement and to get involved with urban farming? I would say the first thing we all need to do is become aware of some of the challenges and the problems associated with our food system. So dig deeper about this fridge that we open every day and the food that we consume every day and that we often don't even think twice about. Also, voting with your fork is a very powerful tool we have. We often feel very helpless and very useless against tackling climate change and tackling all of these huge challenges. But we as consumers have immense power, and we can decide which food systems are we supporting. So vote with your fork. Grow your own. Obviously, I could not recommend this enough. This is all, this is our core, right? So get your hands dirty, look for a space, look for a community garden, and get to grow your own. It's an incredibly gratifying experience. And also, I think waste is a huge it's a huge issue. And to wrap it up, I would say, take a stand. No matter what you do, no matter what you do as a consumer, we need governments to get on board here. We need to pressure all of our different governments to do their job and to do their part in helping us rethink our food system and putting policies that support a different future. So I'm going to finish this. I know that I'm over time. I have other things that to share, but I'm happy to take questions from Christina, from the audience.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you so much for bearing with us during the technical issues. The same goes for our audience. So thanks for your patience. So please do drop your questions right now for Paul, because he's still with us for a few minutes, and I'm sure he's more than happy to answer your questions. So we are monitoring the screen here and looking forward to hear from you. In the meantime, I might just get started without you guys. And as I see your questions, I'll pass them on. I'd like to ask one question that I had in the back of my head even before this presentation. Deeply rooted even in your name, Rooftop, right, as an urban space, especially for a high-rise city like Hong Kong, and we heard 6 million square meters. I had no idea.
Yes.
That is a huge amount of space. How about other cities? What is the next urban space that is going to become the Republic?
the Podium Republic or the Balcony Republic?
Exactly.
Yes, there could be so many republics. We say rooftop just because for us, that's the ultimate, urban space that's available in Hong Kong, and that's where we see the biggest opportunity. Like we said, 6 million square meters of rooftop space. Mm-hmm. But it could be, we also have farms everywhere else, on podiums, on the ground, on balconies, and backyards, and so on. So it can be anywhere. It doesn't have to be rooftop. And obviously, there's a whole indoor farming movement that's also, booming at the moment, where with the use of technology, we can also grow in an indoor environment, mm-hmm. controlling the environment and using LED lights and using different sort of farm tech systems that allow us to grow indoors as well. So anywhere, any space any space could be converted into a growing space.
So I guess people could start from observing their apartments, their buildings, and just look up what is possible to be done in those spaces. Right? I'm thinking for our Hong Kong small apartments, if you don't have a rooftop indoors, you could have those kind of kits with the LED lights built in it, really tiny. They also look good on your furniture. I see some questions from the audience, so I'd like to take them. Cathy is asking, what are the difficulties of carrying out rooftop farming compared to traditional farming in the rural areas?
Well, generally speaking, when we grow on rooftops, so we don't use the same kind of soil. For example, if we're using soil, we don't actually use real soil from the ground, because that would not. We generally grow mostly on raised beds or some sort of planters, and so we need to adapt to growing in a much more contained space compared to growing directly on the ground, where plants have all the space, all the depth of soil, and all the good stuff that's in the soil to grow healthily. So we need to recreate that in a planter, and that means that we need to use different kind of potting mix and different sort of amendments that we use to make the right kind of soil structure and texture that we would need to put in a planter. We need to look at things like loading. So as we are putting all of this soil and all of this equipment on a rooftop, we will need to make sure that the weight we're adding to that structure is in line with the bearing capacity of the soil. We need to look for, sunlight conditions. Obviously, if you're out in a rural environment, you have all the sun. But if you're in the middle of the city, especially in Hong Kong, there's so many buildings everywhere, you could be very shaded. So we always look for, okay, what's the orientation of the building? How much, shade do we get from the near buildings? And we look for the best spot, in the rooftop. And then we look at things like, access to water. What is the access for people as well to come? Do we have enough space for not just for growing, but also to have groups and engage groups of people with activities and with workshops. So we need to bear all of those considerations and like building and sort of architectural considerations to make sure that our installations work and are sort of well integrated with those buildings.
I think it's a nice concept that you have to go around the architecture,
yes.
right, to make farming happen. That's really cool. Next question we have is again about rooftops. Are all rooftops suitable to hold a rooftop farm? What about the older buildings that do not have that infrastructure?
Yeah, so not all the rooftops may be suitable for rooftop farming. In fact, the 6 million square meters of available rooftop space that could be suitable for farming, that calculation already rules out a whole range of buildings. I didn't do the study myself, so I can't remember all the assumptions, but I remember he was, the professor who did this was like, okay, I'm gonna rule out all the buildings that are 1980s, like older than 1980s, already ruling out. I'm gonna rule out all of the walk-up buildings. I'm gonna rule out, all of the space where we know there's AC units and sort of building equipment and so on. And, even ruling all of those things out, he came up with a number of 6 million square meters. Which is monumental. We're not even scratching like a 1% or like a 2% of that right now. So not all of the space is suitable, but there's so much space that is suitable.
I think what's really cool is that now we're talking about infrastructure that is already existing, but imagine what we could do if we thought of the architecture with a rooftop garden in mind, right? So if the future development kept that in mind, we could really grow cities into green spaces.
Absolutely, that's also what the future holds. Is we are more and more integrating urban farming with the very concept and design of our buildings and of our cities. So now we're dealing with like existing buildings. We need to see how we retrofit an urban farm. But moving forward, more and more, and you see this happening in Hong Kong, all the property developers are integrating already urban farms into their designs.
Yeah.
And then we can, we have much more flexibility and much more possibilities in how that looks like and how can we integrate
absolutely
an urban farm.
And it makes usually for much nicer buildings as well, I gotta say. Yeah. All right, one more question. On behalf of Mark, who asked on Instagram, thanks for sharing, Paul. Do you think education is also important for the community? I feel like I don't have enough knowledge, and this actually kind of ties in with what I also wanted to ask related to education. Do you think farming should be a subject in school even? Maybe we can elaborate a little bit on that.
Yeah, so I think perhaps Mark was asking more in terms of like his personal like knowledge. How does he have access to like knowledge about farming and to be a more successful grower and a more successful urban farmer? What I can tell you is that learning about farming is like learning Chinese as a non-Chinese speaker. It takes forever. Like it's a lifelong, learning sort of experience, and you never stop learning about farming. There's so many things to learn, and there's so many things to learn also from practice. It's not something that you learn just like that. So it takes a lot of experience and a lot of practice. Obviously, studying and all of that also helps, but you need time to kind of build up your skills and your understanding. And that's why also we offer quite a lot of different workshops and different programs to try and educate people on their growing journey and help them be more equipped to be more successful at growing their own food. So absolutely, it's key. I've heard so many stories of people, I started, but I didn't know, and then my basil, everything died, and I don't know why, and it takes trial and error to really get there. But no one is born with a green thumb. It's possible to learn, and it's possible to kind of build your skills and your understanding along the way. And then more in regards to your question about education, more in terms of like schools education, absolutely, I think it's critical that we integrate this from day one. We are raising kids that are completely disconnected from their food sources, that don't know where the food comes from. We take kids to organic farms or to our rooftop farms, and they've never seen a tomato plant grow before. They've never seen animal farms before. I always tell this anecdote of a kid who we took to an organic farm and we showed them a goat.
Mm-hmm.
And he looked at the goat and he said, "Oh, it's a unicorn." Because he saw like a fairy animal with horns, and in his mind, he connected that with a unicorn rather than with our own food. That's how disconnected and how far removed our kids are from our own food. And it's imperative that we integrate that with our curriculums, and that's something we're working on at the moment. We're developing a curriculum for schools that's called the Learning Gardens program, where we integrate activities. We build a school farm to begin with, and then we use that as a learning resource for teachers to learn about, or for students to learn about all kinds of things. We can learn about maths, science, language, arts, and so on. But we learn about food, we learn about sustainability, we learn about the environment, and so on and so on.
And I think you're absolutely right. It's imperative because this detachment from where food comes from is almost shocking sometimes. In the previous episode, we said we don't even remember anymore what's in season, yes, right? What's supposed to be around at a certain time of the year. I feel it should be as imperative as a digital literacy, for example. You can't really function and eat healthily and buy consciously without having that education imparted in school. So yeah. I do agree that it's very important, and very happy to hear that you are on that path, yes, to bring this type of education in school. I do see other questions, but I'm afraid that I have to, not interrupt, but kind of wrap up the episode here. But what we can do is we can take them and then write the answers from Paul into the description of our video so that you'll also all have access to it. I apologize for that. I just want to remind you to join in for our next episode next week on Thursday with our very own CEO, Katarina Unger. And remember to fill out our feedback form. Forgive us for the technical issues, we're aware of that, but remember that if you are based in Hong Kong, you also have the chance to win a day pass for the Hive Hong Kong. So once again, Paul, thank you so much for being here with us. This was great. We learned a lot, and we will see you all to our next episode next week. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.